Welcome everybody. I have got a star guest for us tonight. The problem is, nobody seems,
Ta-da!
Oh, here he is. When did he turn up? Has anyone got biscuits? Are they good? We've got a buzz.
Oh.
We need somebody here on the tech, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Andrew's going to go and do the tech. Excellent.
It could be because we're the mics.
We're too close.
And maybe a bit too loud.
We're too friendly.
Yeah.
Oh, well done. Good move. Thank you. Right, has anyone seen our speaker for tonight? Anyone seen him anywhere? Where is he? It's Tom. Ooh. You come a long way tonight.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Has it been arduous?
It has, yeah.
Did you get some coffee?
I did.
What's
to
it
wake
like?
Up. It's lovely. I do like this
Our
coffee.
first service where we've been able to have tea and coffee. Yeah, hey, cheers everyone. And so long as nobody objects, we're not wearing masks inside either. But if anybody wants to wear a mask, they can. Anyway.
Feel free to.
Great.
I was just thinking, you normally have questions on the table. And I was thinking, I forgot to print them off. So sorry about that.
That's all right.
But everybody seems to have been talking for a while.
Am I happy with that? Oh, lovely. Does that look all right for the... I'm going to move out of the way. It's going to be Tom. So, yeah. You've prepared something to share, haven't you?
I have.
So Tom is going to share something of his story. And then we'll see how long he goes on for, but hopefully we've got time for questions. And I've been trying to get the young people to have some really juicy questions up their sleeve. Not doing that very well, but, might be good.
I couldn't even think of any questions to ask myself.
No. So, for those who've not been before and whatever, the bit that will be recorded and go out will just be Tom talking. So you can ask whatever you like. You won't be on screen. You won't be on voiceover or anything else. It's just literally Tom sharing his story. Are we excited to hear Tom's story? Yeah, interested. Yeah, good. Have we pressed record over there yet?
I did.
Excellent. I'll scoot by there on my way with my biscuit. Do I need to do anything more to introduce you?
No?
No, I've got my biscuits. Can I crunch? It's like being in the cinema, isn't it?
If you're going to crunch, turn your mic off.
Oh.
Yeah, I've been thinking about exactly what to share and what parts of my story are more different than other people's, because there's lots of similarities in, for instance, Javier's story or Nick's story. There's different bits that resonate there. So I'll try and pick some of the more unique bits to me. Like, for instance, the first time I did any public speaking, I spoke about chickens. So I don't think anybody else who comes to 7 p.m. live has been able to say that. And I was supposed to talk for 5 minutes, and I think I went on for 20 minutes. And the teacher said to me, I'm only going to mark the first 5 minutes. Well, I said, that's fine, I had a great time up front. Yeah, but when you do that, when you're in secondary school, you do get a nickname. So I wouldn't necessarily advise anyone to do that.
What was your nickname?
Chicken.
And you've given it to your boys too?
Well, yeah. Yeah, that's what we call them, but not because of that. It's just, I don't know. I don't know why. So anyway, I'll start at the beginning of it. I was born in Liverpool. And the first place that I lived, well, before I even got home, I was in Alderhay in an incubator for a while. I was a prem baby. So that was my first encounter with, well, my first moment of, oh, will I live or not? And there's different moments in my story, which I don't know if I'll get around to sharing tonight, where I was like, that was nearly the end of Tom. So got home and we lived, our first house was in Malwood Street in the Dingle in Liverpool, a little terraced house on a steep slope. But I was a baby, I didn't remember that at all. My dad was a teacher, my mum was a full-time mum. They're still together, so we're something of a unique family, and that was something I always took for granted. And when I was in school later in life, I'd hear about other people and they didn't have a dad or they didn't have a mum. And I'd just think, wow, I thought everyone had a mum and a dad. And then, so we moved to Ashbourne Road off Egbert Road in Egbert, and that was another mid-terrace house. And when we lived there, we used to just go over to Sefton Park all the time. That's where we spent lots of time growing up, in the park. My mum trying to tire us out, or my dad, because my mum had been looking after us when my dad was in work. And then a while after that, we moved to Hale Village when I was still at the end of primary school, and that was when I first got chickens. So they were the pet that I wanted. My sister wanted a hamster. That was the first pet that got on the list. And then my older sister, so I've got two sisters, Katie, who's about a year younger than me, Laura, who's about a year older than me. So my parents must have wanted to get kids out the way, get it done and dusted, then move on. And my older sister had wanted a rabbit, so my dad built a hutch. He's brilliant with his hands, still is great at making absolutely anything you could think of he could make. And so my sister got a rabbit, and they got to me, and I said, I'd like some chickens. And my dad was like, okay. He built a shed and a run for them, and we ended up having chickens. School, for me, though, was a place that I didn't especially enjoy. Being someone who, even though my dad's a Scouser, because my mum was from down south, I spent most of my time with my mum. My accent didn't sound like other Scousers, and I often get accused of not being from Liverpool. My accent comes out when I'm tired or if I've had a few drinks. It is there, but it's just hiding. So I was singled out because I spoke a bit different than other people. First school I went to was Matthew Arnold in the Dingle, and I was always in trouble there. Mrs. Warbrick, the head teacher, knew me very well. And one of my punishments, I think I spat at someone once, and the punishment was, there's a bowl, spit into it and keep spitting. And it's surprising how quickly your saliva dries up when you're told to spit into a bowl. So didn't like that school especially. And we moved because my older sister Laura, she got stabbed by a lad who had a Stanley knife. I don't know what she said or what happened, but she got stabbed, and so she moved schools to Booker Avenue in Mossley Hill. And she was fine. I think probably had a tetanus shot from it or something. And still was herself. And then, because my sister moved because she'd been stabbed, the school was very accommodating in Booker Avenue. And then when it came to a new term, my mum and dad were like, well, we can't send Katie and Thomas to, that's what my mum and dad call me, Thomas, or sometimes they call me Tosh, which I don't even notice, but other people are like, they just called you a different name than I call you. I'm like, I didn't even notice. So my mum, she always would drive us to school, when we were younger, we'd walk to school from Egbert to the Dingle. And then when we had two cars, my dad would drive to work and my mum would drive us to school. But my mum was like, well, I can't get 3 kids to 2 different schools. And so we got into Booker Avenue on the appeals process. But everyone had already started the term before me. And again, another outsider moment. I was starting after everybody else, and it felt like, because they'd all gone to the infants there, and when they moved up to the juniors, it felt like everyone was already mates. And I was just trying to figure out how to fit in there. And so I was, I think my mum would probably coach me on how to make friends like we do with our boys. You can't always play the games you want. Sometimes you've got to play their game and then say, could you play my game now? And you've got to learn to negotiate a bit. And so probably got coached there. And anyway, I think there was, I don't know if it's still played in schools, but there was Kiss Chase. And this was a game I got invited to join in, or I'd just joined in because there didn't seem to be any rules from what I could see. And so obviously the person who was it or something would be running around and trying to kiss someone. I don't even know the rules now, to be honest. Other than that, when someone says to you, why don't you kiss them? It's always worth checking if they're the same sex as you. Which I didn't know that rule. And so I got tricked into, instead of kissing just the girls, someone said, why don't you kiss him? And I thought, I'm playing the game, I'm finding out I can join in, I can make friends, I'm being popular. No, I was being taken for a mug. And so in primary school, in like year 3, I got labelled as gay. I ended up making friends, but I was never with the cool crowd because I wasn't really sporty. I didn't really fit in. And so I just ended up with these other people who didn't really fit in either, so we sort of all didn't fit in together. Along the way, my mum and dad have been doing their best to put a roof over our heads and to teach us about the world, but they didn't tell me about those lessons, and about faith. And so they took us along to church. Now, years later I found out my dad didn't have a faith at all, but he just turned up to support my mum. And we went to different churches, and we ended up finding St. Philemon's in Toxteth. It had great work for kids, great family work. There was a toddler group, and there was young adults as well. There was a good youth there, a good youth group. And so we went along there. When we moved, that was okay being at that church when we lived in Eggborough. It wasn't too far away. But when we moved out to Hale Village, my mum and dad got fed up of the drive every Sunday. It was felt like it was half the day. So they went, right, we're going to look for a different church. So we started looking. And I think we were at the end of primary school, going into secondary school. And we ended up trying another local church, St. Mary's, Hale Village. That lasted for a little while. It was just a bit interesting because it was a more traditional. Fell out there because the vicar was interested when they did a little survey. All of the things that my mum and dad said, oh, we can help with the kids' work. We used to run a bookstall in the other church. We did this, we did that. And we're prepared to give to the church. And the only thing they got chased up on was the money. Yes, please, we'll have that, but we don't want anything else. So they fell out there, and we started looking for another church. The church we found was another local one. It was Speak Baptist Church. And I don't know if you've ever seen a biscuit, BN biscuits, and they've got a big smiley face on, and almost like round cheeks. The fella on the door who greeted us had the same face, but he was a black man. And his name was Caleb, and he greeted us like we were his family, like we were these long-lost family. Oh, it's so great, welcome, come in. And I was thinking, my mum and dad met him before. Do they know him? And this was my first experience of welcome in the church. we'd sort of grown up in this other one. And sort of different people knew us. And you got your hand slapped when you took more than one biscuit afterwards. So you'd sneak under the counter and reach over and hope no one had noticed and be feeling round to grab another biscuit. But in this church, you were offered a second biscuit. They were delighted to have people turn up. And they spoke to us like adults. They treated us like adults. I don't know if that was because there weren't any other kids there and they didn't know what to do. But they welcomed us and they told stories and jokes with us. And they were just incredible. So that was the welcome in the church. Jumping back to school again. So primary school finished, and some of my mates in primary school have been at the St. Philemon's Church, Phillies in Toxteth, and they moved to St. Margaret's, and I moved to St. Margaret's as well. But so did some of the people who'd been bullying me. And even at one point, the fella who'd floored me in the toilets when he kicked me in the nuts. And so this label that I thought, I've kept my head down. This label followed me into secondary school. And secondary school is a lot bigger. And I found it to be a fair bit meaner than primary school. I still didn't fit in there. For a while, when I used to get into school early, we'd be playing footy on the yard. And I've never been great at sports, never fully understood every rule. Probably should learn all about the rules if you're playing games. But I was pretty good at running, other than being asthmatic. I could sprint and keep up with a fair number of people. And so I figured out, if you want to kick the ball, that's part of the rules in football, to kick the ball. The best position to be, I didn't want to be the goalkeeper, too much pressure. But if you're in defence, the ball's always going to come to the defenders at some point. You're going to get the strikers coming towards you. So I was always in defence. And I always managed to be able to get the ball unless someone could outrun me. But I had tougher ankles than other people as well. And I didn't fully appreciate that just because you got the ball doesn't mean that, you could kick through the other person's ankles. And I started getting threats from the other kids in the school saying, if you carry on playing, don't bother. So I thought, I best hang up my football boots here and stopped playing football, and found where all of the other undesirable kids were, around the back of this porter cabin next to the chapel. So I made friends with these people who didn't fit in elsewhere. So, school, church a bit, finished school, and did my A-levels there. And it was interesting, staying on at a sixth form college, the teachers treated you more like adults, and that was really, really good. You're not necessarily able to redefine who you were because there was loads of people who knew you before, but you certainly got treated differently. After that, even though I got straight E's in my A-levels because I never learnt how to revise, GCSEs, I got A's and B's, I never revised for them. It seemed like common sense to me, but A-levels, you couldn't get away with common sense or any of that. You had to study hard and read your books, and I couldn't do that. So I got straight E's. Even though I got straight E's, Liverpool Hope were very accommodating and said, we'll take your money, and if you're rubbish, then you just won't come back after your first year. So I was like, okay, well, we'll give that a go. Went to uni there. Now, it was great being in school because you're in school full time and everything's sorted. You don't really have to think for yourself in school. You have to think for yourself a bit during your A-levels. But when you go to uni, it was very different. Because even though I was classed as being in full-time education, I was in 1 day a week. And on the other days, you're supposed to be reading your books and studying hard. I was playing pool with some mates. Or I don't know what else I was doing, probably riding my bike. I like riding my bike. Managed to scrape through uni though, because not all of it is about exams. There's lots of coursework, and I loved the coursework. When you could sit down and read a book and put something in your own words, I thought that was plagiarism, but when you put it in your own words, it isn't. That's apparently the thing to do. I was terrified I was going to be pulled in for plagiarism, because I was copying from these books and I was changing these words here and there and trying to put it in my own words. So I've always struggled with the rules, understanding them. Got to in uni as well, because I was full-time, but my mum and dad were like, well, what are you doing with the rest of your time? You best get a job. So I got a job in PC World when it was on Speak Retail Park. Worked there on Saturdays and Sundays, and because I was there on Sundays, and I think by this point the vicar at this new church with the biscuit fella on the door, the pastor there had died, and this new fella had come in, and he was so different, and things were just changing and really chaotic, and my mum and dad didn't like that, and I was at uni anyway, and they left the church, and I left the church because I was in PC World, but I was going along to the Christian Union. At unis, they have different clubs and groups for different people, and one of them was this Christian Union. And that became this church for me, this new church family. And instead of it being old people and people with big smiley faces, there were still people with smiley faces, but just not like that biscuit fella. They were more my age. They had similar interests, but you'd end up talking with them. You go to the student union bar afterwards, and you'd have different, deep and meaningful conversations, which I've always loved. Thinking about, well, what's the meaning of life, or what's, why did God create wasps or something? And so I found like this new Christian family of people who were a bit more like me, and plenty of them had the quirks, different unique things about them, but they also were really comfortable in themselves. At the end of uni, so through this Christian union, I met a girlfriend. And at the end of uni, she'd said to me, Tom, I'm going to be going to, I can't remember if it was Thailand or somewhere like this, to do something called a DTS, Discipleship Training School with YWAM, Youth with a Mission. And it's going to be for 6 months. And I thought, flipping heck, 6 months? I don't want to wait around for her to come back. So I started looking into one, and I went 3 months before hers, so I wasn't on my own. I didn't tell my mum and dad till the last minute, a month before. Oh, by the way, I booked tickets, I'm going to the other side of the world. They were a little bit concerned, but they let me go. They kept an eye on me through opening my mail, thinking I was being brainwashed. But it was one of the best experiences of my life. Came back home, and things, it's strange. When you go away to somewhere that's completely new, and you spend lots of time thinking, you start to appreciate all of the things that you start missing from home. The different people, the road signs, the grey weather. I mean, I didn't miss English people very much. It was really interesting. The sunnier a place is, the smilier the people are. And when I was flying home, I was thinking the people are getting more and more miserable, and they're getting paler and paler. And it was comical. But even though from my time at uni, where I treated my mum and dad's home, I stayed at home, I treated my mum and dad's home like a hotel. And my relationship with them had sort of frayed, because when you don't spend time with someone and you don't talk to them, it's not much of a relationship. I came home and I found that I was able to love my parents even more. So this thing had fizzled out with this girl. We ended up being 9 months apart from each other. And I've been praying about it while I was out there as well, thinking, is this good? Is this the right thing? Is this a healthy relationship? Or do I need to make a fresh start with all of the new thinking and spending time praying and reading the Bible and learning more about God and thinking about what a healthy relationship looks like? Do I need to make a fresh start there? And I ended up spending a day not eating anything, fasting, and I felt that God was saying to me, yeah, make a fresh start. It wasn't a healthy relationship, so you need to cut ties, or say goodbye and cut ties. I got home, had the conversation with my ex-girlfriend, and on seeing me at first, she was all smiles, and then she was really upset. Nina had always been a mate. When I started at this Christian union, I found out that there was this really weird vicar, that one of these people, they went to this church on a Sunday, they didn't work on a Sunday, and they said, this vicar, he's dead weird, he's got a full-size TARDIS on his driveway, you know, Doctor Who, and he's got a life-size Dalek as soon as you walk into the vicarage, and he's got an Ood and a Cyberman and all these weird, and he is the local Doctor Who expert. And I was like, I've never been to a church that's got a weirdo for a vicar. And I thought, that sounds really interesting. Went to that church when I'd finished at PC World. And hung out with there were people my age there, and that's where I met Nina. We'd been friends for 4 years. Came back from New Zealand, and she was one of the few people who'd stayed in touch with me while I was out there emailing. And ended up thinking about all sorts of different things. I was chatting with a mate of mine, Owen, and I was saying, I'm thinking about asking Nina out. And he says, and I said, but I don't know if my mum and dad like her. And he said, it doesn't matter what your mum and dad, if your mum and dad like her or not. If you like her, you'll be the one that's spending time with her. And if you decide to marry her, you'll be the one that's spending even more time with her. I said, oh, that's actually a very good point. So I ended up asking Nina out, and had the same conversation when I was thinking about marrying Nina. And he said again, you'll be the one spending time with her. Don't worry about what your mum and dad think. If you think you'll be happy and you'll be able to make a life together, then that's more important. So Nina and I had known each other for about 4 years. We dated for, I think, I can't remember how long we dated, but we got engaged on the 20th of April 2008. We got engaged then. We got married on the 20th of September 2008. So quite a short time that we dated, quite a short time that we were engaged before the wedding. A couple of years into the marriage, George turns up. That's how it happens, just blink of an eye. And then a couple of years after that, Isaac turns up. When I came home from New Zealand, I'm going on too long, sorry. Came home from New Zealand and ended up working, I'd worked traveling about the country And I didn't like that very much. I'd already been disconnected while I was in New Zealand. I was even more disconnected while I was in the UK, travelling all over the place, not being able to hang out with my mates. And so I was looking for a job local. Liverpool Airport were getting their runway renewed. And my mum and dad, who I was still living with, live at one end of the runway. I applied for this job, had the best interview ever. I turns up suited and booted, dead smart, to a building site, and the fellow's like, "Oh, don't come in here, I'll meet you out on the road." And I had my interview on the pavement outside the airport. And from what I said and what I put in my CV, the fellow was like, "You've got the job." Worked for Tarmac for many, many years, moved around a little bit. Nina and I, we rented our first house together around the corner from our old church. Then we bought a house around the corner from our old church. Lots of coincidences there that made it happen. So this church with the weirdo vicar, who's the local Doctor Who expert, there was a visiting minister there. And I don't know if you remember Gareth, who was here a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago. It was to be his future father-in-law. So Gareth's future father-in-law, this Irish fella, is preaching in the church, and he says, "There's a shortage of vicars, and we're praying that God is calling different people." And you know when the National Lottery first started, there was like this big hand, it could be you, come down from the sky. This fellow was like, "God could be calling you." And it felt like he pointed straight at me. Now, I wasn't right at the front. I was right at the back of the church. Because when you've got friends in the church, you can sit at the front because you've got no kids. But as soon as you get kids in this church, all the kids' toys were at the back. So Nina and I were on our own at the back with George on the playmat. So it could be you. And from that moment, I started thinking, it could be me. I wonder if I could do that job. This vicar, it doesn't look too hard. I'm sure I could do that. Lots of things going through my head. Years pass. Chat with the curate there, thinking about this thing, thinking about being a vicar. Okay, if you're serious, he sent me along to some things. Tried to speak with the vicar. Didn't want to know. Okay. A couple of years later, another curate. Still think God's calling me. What? How long have you been thinking that? A couple of years. Right, if you're thinking that, I'll give him a kick up the backside. So she gives the vicar a kick up the backside. Put all my paperwork in. And ended up meeting Helen, who helped me through the discernment process of becoming a vicar. And it's very unusual that I would come back here to be the curate. My journey all along the way, I've felt like an outcast, an outsider at various points. It's only been within the church and with the welcome I've received in the church that I've ever felt truly at home. Even with my parents, I've always felt a bit uncomfortable because they can, I hope they're not watching this, they can be a bit scary. I found with certain people, you can't always say what you think because they shout you down or they say, well, I think this, and so you can't think that. But people in the church weren't like that to me. They were like, oh, that's very interesting. Have you thought about it this way? Oh, no, not thought. And it was a gentler approach that seemed to suit me. So I've always felt more at home within the church. My faith has always been very internal. And when I'm thinking about this, when I say internal, it's always been in my head. It's always been in my head. There was a moment as a kid, though, where it moved from my head to my heart, because I was watching my mum and dad. We moved to this other church and there's no kids work going on, so my mum and dad thought we need to get them along to like a kids church or something like that. So they took us along to this place, and it was run by the youth and the kids, and it was brilliant. There was this weird interpretive dance that I still don't understand, because I don't get that. But there was live music, which I loved. And there was someone who had the bright idea of playing the video of Jesus' crucifixion, and in the background, the song by Bryan Adams, "Everything I Do It for You." And I watched that, and I was in tears. And I thought, if Jesus did that for me, what can I do to show Jesus how much I love him? And in that moment was this decision to live a life that showed Jesus I loved him and showed Jesus people that I loved them. I could go on for another far too long, and I think I'll end there. There's things I wanted to say that I didn't get a chance to say, but what we're going to do now is you can chat around your tables and think, Tom, you need to check your watch more often, you need to get the battery changed. I'll play a video while you all chat, and then we can come back, and if you've got any questions, we can do those.
As there's still some coffee left, Val, if anybody wants more coffee.